and Dr. S Rajan chairing it and moderating it, orchestrating it in such a beautiful way. I think those are some of the wonderful, wonderful memories that I cherish and that I have, which is going to help in our journey as HR professionals. So thank you so much, Dr. S Rajan, to give that privilege and opportunity, and thanks to be here on this pedestal for us to have this interview. I still recall the interview that you had done with erstwhile chairman Cyrus Mistry, and I'm having the same feelings when I'm going to interview you today in the same fashion. The only difference is that was physical, and this is more like a virtual. So thank you so much for being on this platform.
My privilege, man. My privilege.
Thank you, sir. Thanks. So let's start. We all know that you have more than 3.5 decades of experience, and the first half has been in sales and marketing and P&L roles, and then you moved into the second half part, which was in HR to begin with in Ernst & Young as the global head of HR consulting practice, then followed by Group CHRO and Group CHRO of Tata Sons. So what made you switch mid-career, and that too specifically into HR field? Would like to hear from you, sir.
Sure, Shyam. Before I get there, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much. I'm grateful. It's a Saturday morning, and I found it difficult to actually take time out on Saturday morning and be with you. So I'm sure if you are there, I need to be eternally grateful that you spared time for me. Akala, before I begin, I think you have a very nice way of speaking, and I like your way you present yourself, and your generosity far exceeds my capability, but I shall not be overly modest. But coming back to what Shyam was asking. So Shyam, it wasn't really planned. Funny thing I keep saying, there are two things which may be of interest to you. The only time I wrote my CV was back at XLR in '83. And none of the jobs that I've done, I've ever had to write a CV, because somehow either I got calls or I ended up actually picking up a job. And I've never had to write one, except when the HR department told me, yeah, now that you've already joined, have something on the files. So I would tell them, yeah, going to take something from LinkedIn and just add to the file. So I don't really claim to have got my career order right. But what I can tell you is, I remember I did my business management from Excel. It was not personal management and IR. And the HR program that we have, which is very highly regarded. So I did marketing and finance from there. And in the first 18 years, largely, I was in companies like Asian Paints, Blast, and I did some consulting also. And all of them were in business roles, in sales and marketing, in P&L roles. It never wore HR in the distinct sense as either the practitioner or a consulting part. So while I was in a company called Asia Online sometime back, I think late 90s, I got a call from Ernst & Young, and it was a call from a chairman himself. And so I said, okay, let me go have a cup of tea and get to know what they have in mind. And he said, we want you to actually come in as a head of a new practice that we wish to create, which is HR consulting. We provide a whole range of services, and Ernst & Young is a global firm. And in India, I think it's even more important that we set up a HR advisory capability, and we would like you to actually helm it. So I tried telling him that, listen, I'm not an HR guy. I'm sure there are enough people out there who are eminently capable, and I've come more from a sales and marketing stream and finance stream. I'm not really a HR person. So he said, I'm fairly comfortable that you will be good at consulting, and what product or what offerings you take to the market is your problem, not mine. I chair the organization. It is you who are taking the courage to actually look at an HR consulting practice. So it was not really so planned. But if I go back, I think I have been enriched in a number of ways in my first 18 years of having been in line roles. And you realize it's very, very tough. It's not easy when you come out from campus when you're 21. And by virtue of the fact that you are an MBA and all that, you start off as a manager without knowing how to manage. So, life teaches you very strangely. And I recall reading in school words from Thomas Gray. He writes in a very famous poem called Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. And there's something he writes which perhaps applies to me. And I've also used it as an inspiration for people around me. And to quote him, Thomas Gray writes that full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark, unfathomed caves of the ocean bare. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its sweetness in the desert air. So somewhere, and I came from a small town myself, and I had the opportunity of getting education thanks to parents. And I realized that when you actually become a manager, there is a certain accountability, there is a responsibility, and you learn to lead people to the extent you can. And I don't call myself a great leader there. And in that process, I think business teaches you a lot about being with people, leading them, managing them. And I think that is the learning I really carried forward to HR. So I'm not a classic HR professional in the traditional sense, but that has been the beginning of my journey.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for that. And I think a very important point that you brought out was that the business teaches you a lot, and every manager is like an HR manager playing dual roles, multiple roles. Very well said. So moving from there, you did your PhD from IIT Delhi on leadership. And if you Google leadership, I think there is going to be umpteen number of pages which talks about leadership, and that's one particular area where thousands of books have also been written. So what is your definition of a leader?
You know, you have been one yourself, Shyam, and it's a privilege actually to be able to have a conversation with you on a medium like this. I'm terrible when it comes to a technology-based Zoom kind of a medium, because I prefer actually being in the presence of people. And I think every individual has an aura of your own, and when you're physically there, you tend to connect and relate. So it's a little difficult for me, I must confess. And PhD, it wasn't easy, to say the least. I started PhD as a part-time pursuit. Essentially, I was at that point of time 47. I was in a global role, and I still had the urge, and primarily for one reason. I wanted to be able to teach after I retired. And there was another unsaid reason. I wanted to be a doctor when I was very young. Now, so I couldn't become an MBBS doctor. So I said, chalo, this is a good opportunity to shamelessly have doctor as a prefix, which I always use because I'm very proud of the fact that by the time I finished my PhD, it was I was 53. And but I thank God, IIT is a wonderful institution, and to get a PhD from there, the way they're very, very stringent in terms of the way they go about it, I'm glad it's behind me. And you're absolutely right on definition of leadership. There are two things I picked up in the course of my 7 years doing my PhD. One is, Warren Bennis, who was a masterclass in terms of unraveling what leadership is all about, himself confessed that he knows more than 300 definitions of what leadership is all about. And he's still trying to figure out which is right. When somebody of his stature says that I better behave myself, and I also admit that I am woefully short of what it means. I'm reminded of what Napoleon once said, that leaders are dealers in hope. And I thought it has a way of summing things up. And I really believe that leaders in whichever walk of life, and typically when we talk of leaders, we tend to look at somebody who's in the helm. In my mind, there are leaders at every level. And we tend to overestimate those who are higher in the hierarchy. And I feel, leaders, irrespective of the walk of life, they have a clear purpose, a visionary purpose. They have personal optimism, which actually is almost infectious, whether it is energy, their optimism, and they have innate ability to be able to pull people together and use shared vision as almost a platform, and have the courage to execute dreams together. And that really, in my mind, is what leadership is all about. And of all of these, I feel shared vision, where it's not a vision of one individual, one organization, it is a vision that's actually a collective vision, is indeed the shorthand of authentic leadership. And on the path, and leadership is never really easy. One other thing that I would perhaps mention, and I go back to what Tennyson wrote in Ulysses, that one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive to seek, to find, and not to yield. I think that that's a hallmark of a good leader, where in good times and bad times, he has the courage to be able to go together on that caravan and reach, or at least move towards the destination that we need to reach. I still don't have a clear enough definition, but one of the things PhD taught me is that how little you know. I mean, when you do literature review, you realize it is almost impossible to think of something that others have not already thought of. And it's a great learning, and you start off from the alphabet all over again, and you keep aside all that you think you know and realize there is so much you don't know. So I don't know if I've done justice to your question, but that's the best way I can put it.
No, I think the word that I really stuck to me was about the shared vision, which is, I think, in today's times, it's even more the need of the hour, because we have been seeing a lot of organizations which has got vision shared. But if a leader has a shared vision and takes people along with him, I think people will see him as an authentic leader, as a servant leader, as you rightly mentioned. So talking about leader, is there any leader that you are inspired by and you look upon the person as your role model?
Actually, I've been asked this before, and I struggle to answer it because I think most business leaders we're all aware of. And in my own journey, what I've realized is that younger colleagues of mine have been great leaders in their own right, and which is why I really believe that we should not, in our minds, look at leadership as being at the helm of an activity or a CEO or a CXO. I feel at every level, you have a chance to actually be a great leader. And let me pick a very, you're talking role models. And there are many that I can cite where all of us are aware of people who have done exceedingly well in business or led organizations to great glory. But I'll pick up an example of somebody who was just a sales representative. Way back, I'm talking about in the 80s. And I'll tell you a story, Shyam, in terms of what I've personally seen. Now, he was this gentleman, his name is Gangan, and he was a godown keeper when I was in Asian Paints, somewhere in Guwahati. And he was wanting to come back to Trivandrum, which is his home. And with great difficulty, he managed to get a transfer. And the only slot that was vacant was that of a sales representative. He was never one. And he also had to lead the local distributors, reps, and all that. So it was a managerial role in some senses, but he was also a representative. And I recall we were having a party at my place. And somewhere around 11 o'clock, and it was raining like crazy, he got a call from a dealer in Trivandrum, and he was in Cochin with me, where I was based. Somebody was actually reaching out. Actually, a dealer from Trivandrum reached out, essentially to say that they had supplied paint of a particular color to somebody whose house was getting painted because there was going to be a marriage in the house, and they ran short of that shade, and it was not available anywhere in Trivandrum. So they called Gangadharan and said, we need this badly because guests are going to arrive and all that. That night, he left the party. He said, boss, I have to go. And then he went to the godown keeper's house in the night while it was raining on a bike, picked up the keys, went to the godown, picked up the material, went back to the godown keeper's house to return the keys because you have to open the office next day. And at night, at 1 o'clock in the morning, he he rode the bike in the, in that rain that was, and Kerala, it rains quite heavily. And while it was pouring, he still went all the way to Trivandrum. It must have taken 3-4 hours. He reached in the wee hours of the morning. There were no painters available, obviously, at that time of the day. He actually painted some of the rooms.
Wow.
That was not his job. And it's been so many years, it's almost 3 decades. But for me, what he did was a role model activity in its own right. He led by example. He displayed awesome kind of a customer service that we talk of, and it's easy to talk about it, very difficult to live that. And even today for me, Gangan is a class act when I think of him, saying a leader should have that level of commitment and that clarity of purpose, and that nothing else is more important than ensuring that you delight somebody out there who is your stakeholder. And I think great leaders do that. They look at stakeholders, be it shareholders, be it employees, be it promoters. You look at the cross section of all the stakeholders, and you have that sense of deep commitment to delight, to create value, and make sure there is wealth creation. I think in that evening, I learned so much from Gangan. And next day, I didn't know. The dealer actually called me and said the customers were completely delighted, and they insisted Gangan attend the wedding. And they said, "You're not going to go away." So you're talking of bonds that somebody who can be a leader, irrespective of where you are. And I was his manager, but I think he was far superior to me in what he demonstrated in action.
Absolutely, absolutely, very inspiring story, and the way you narrated it looks like as if it has happened just yesterday. With the kind of passion and with the kind of
it is so vivid in my mind.
Yeah, so vivid. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the impact is something that small change, big difference that we keep talking about. So two things I could pick up from your story and example that you said is the buck stops at me. It's such a profound thing, but it's so difficult to practice. And I think this sales rep proved it in action. And today we hear a lot about great place to work. I think it's time to talk about great people to work. And I think this person
very well put. I completely agree with you. Beautifully put.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's a great example. And moving forward, Dr. Rajan, we have been hearing and seeing this title about you, Alchemist of Happiness, against your name title. So quite intrigued to hear from you. What does this title mean to you?
I must tell you an interesting anecdote. So in 87-88, when I wanted to do my PhD, I met my guide, and she was asking, which are the areas of interest and what would you like to do your PhD on? So I had two topics in mind. One was leadership, because I was already in HR consulting, and it's an area where I've had the opportunity of doing a lot of work with clients. And the other was happiness, on which I've been pursuing for a long time. So I remember the conversation, not in as many words, but essentially what my guide told me is, I think you should stick with leadership. Not that it is any easier, because if you choose happiness, फिर ढूंढते रह जाओगे. Now the funny part is, even leadership as a subject, अभी भी ढूंढ रहा हूँ मैं. I don't think I've reached a point where I understood all the nuances.
Right.
And when I use the term alchemist, I use it with a degree of how do I put it, conservatism in my mind, that the task is not easy to even understand. Enabling it is a different act altogether. And when I say alchemist, if you recall, the traditional meaning of alchemy was that there were many in the past who were trying to take a lesser metal and convert that into gold. Now that almost is a pursuit that has never yielded. But the beauty of alchemy is the fact that in the process of desiring to take something at a lower level, or something lower, not in a pejorative sense, lower in terms of saying gold is more precious than probably other metals, and therefore you are trying to make one metal into a higher metal. Now in that process, they never found gold. But what they did discover in the journey were a number of elements and compounds that were not discovered till then.
Right.
So for me, what I'm alluding to is a journey where I don't think there is a defined destination of happiness that I can reach or will be able to reach. But that journey has been very fulfilling. So that is one part of why I use the term alchemist. And the second is, is it possible for me to find a way where on the path, I could also not just understand it, if possible, enable it. So they came together in my mind, and that's why I use the term alchemist. It's essentially to say that it is a shortcoming and not a definitive way that I can put on the table. That's what I'm trying to indicate.
Okay.
It sounds nice, so I'm happy to use it. I must confess.
That really sounds nice. And a little more deeper on that conversation, you have been researching happiness for over decades. And I understand you also have written a book, quote me if you can, on daily thoughts on happiness. And you're also writing another book. So what sparked of this pursuit? If you can share a little bit more about that.
You know, I don't know, I must have been 12 years or 13 years, and it was my birthday. It's 11/11. Uh, so, I mean, I had a lot of gifts, and there was all cake lighting and then all of that. So, and they sang happy birthday. And I remember going to my parents and asking, why should only one day be happy in the year? Why can't every day be happy? So why do we attribute a particular day you're born to be a happy birthday? And why not have 365 happy birthdays? And somewhere that was perhaps the earliest trigger that I can think of. And then I got caught up into academics and all that. And much later, when I actually started working, I realized that till that point of time, I really could not find ways in which I could make myself happy. But once I became a manager I'm talking way back in '83, I realized that the easier thing to do to get there was to see if you can make others happy. And if there is one pursuit that I have been very, very conscious of almost in every role that I've played all my life, is to look for ways in which at least the small world around me, can I make the place happier than what it was, and see if I could contribute. So that really is the trigger with which I've moved forward. Of course, consulting did change because I started looking at not just in terms of making the small world around me happier, or to actually find ways where I can be happy. But now I had an opportunity of serving clients on the outside. So one of the things I've tried to do is whether it is possible to create environments where we can get there.
Amazing, awesome. And I think I really picked up that seeing others happy and looking for ways happier than what it was. I think that's profound, and it's a beautiful state of mind that you kind of explained. So staying back on the same topic of happiness, I'm sure you have done enough research and a lot of learnings and insights you have gathered over a period of time. So could you share some of your insights and from your learning, research and experience on happiness? What is something that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, funny part about happiness. There are three. I don't know how to put it. So love, leadership, and happiness are easier to experience than to explain. No, it's always a challenge. So let me see. So I'm not going to share something that you don't know, or everybody who's there, in this conversation don't already know. What I have attempted in terms of learnings, not just in terms of the books that I've read or the articles or experiences, but can I actually put a structure? And there is one thing that I've learned, which probably is a little contrarian, that very often, let's say you take the science of positive psychology, they talk of, like we do in HR, focus on the strengths, don't worry too much on the weaknesses. That is much easier to be able to enhance and expand and help deliver outcomes. In my entire pursuit and learning that I've done, what I've learned is that at least when it comes to happiness, I think you first have to figure out how, as an individual, you focus on it before you can actually, as a CHRO or somebody who's a leader, manage to do that for the enterprise at large as a beginning point. And within that, if I'm looking at myself as an individual or you as a person, I think the first thing you have to figure out is what makes you unhappy. And then start figuring out what makes you happy. So there are two levers. In my mind, it is not just taking one lever up and becoming happier than what you are. It is also looking at levers that pull you down. So when you do both of them together is when you actually become happier than what you are. And in a summary, if I have to share a few things that I have picked up on the road, is that if you look at what makes us unhappy, there are perhaps four key elements that I have imbibed, learned, and not necessarily conquered. But I'll be glad to share a few of them. So the first one, which is almost very corrosive, is envy. Now, the moment you start comparing yourself with what somebody else has, in physics, you have this concept of center of gravity. You take a body and when the center of gravity is within the object, the body is stable. The moment the center of gravity starts moving out, the body becomes unstable and loses its equilibrium. And I think metaphorically, it's very similar that the moment you start viewing the world around in a mode of comparison, it could be a social comparison in terms of status, it could be comparison on wealth or academics. You are no longer focusing on yourself. You are looking at the world in relative terms. Now, even as a student, I've experienced it. I remember a teacher telling me, I used to be, in my younger days, fairly competitive. So the desire was to stand first in class, if possible, and strive to be at least on the top 3 or top 5. My teacher called me and said, why does it matter to you so much? I mean, whoever is doing what they're doing is because of uniquely what they are. I think you need to focus on yourself. And he had a very interesting observation. He said, instead of looking at anybody else in the class or in terms of looking at a specific rank, just focus on getting 100 in the subject. Then the rest doesn't matter. You're there. So if you can pick up anything that you do and give it the best that you can, I think that is the way to go. And it stayed on my mind. So envy again can be very, very corrosive, and that's the first thing that you need to overcome. The second is fear of public opinion, which also has to some degree not necessarily comparison, but being clouded by what others think of you. And actually, if you look at it, there are very few whose opinion should really matter to you.
Absolutely.
So you would have seen, when we actually speak to audiences in public speaking sessions and all that, when you pause and say, do you have any questions to ask? There is a very profound silence for many seconds before somebody has the courage to ask a question. And every time I've gone back and asked people, why are you hesitating? It's either they don't have a question on mind, which is perfectly okay. I can't be immodest to say that they've understood all I've said so completely that they have no questions to ask. Utna bhi nahi hai. But having said that, I think the major reason why somebody doesn't ask a question is, what will others think of me? What if my question is foolish? What if they laugh at me? And why should I be the first to ask a question? So suddenly the limelight is on them rather than on the speaker.
Right.
And it's again a function of the kind of fear of public opinion that we have. The third element is largely to do with self-centricity. And it's a learning that, it's very easy to focus on yourself and keep asking what is in it for me. And what I've discovered over time, in life, the people that are around you, if I simplify it, let's look at a Venn diagram. So take two circles, and there's an overlapping part. And I'm saying it not literally, but figuratively. It's not mathematical in that sense. But if you say two circles which are overlapping each other, one circle is people you need, and the other circle is people who need you. All you have to do is take care of both of them, and you're in the middle, and you get doubly taken care of. So it actually helps not being overly self-centric, because you're alone when you only bother about yourself. And every time you do something, how do I benefit? If you keep asking that question, I think people move away. But you are able to focus on these two circles. They will conspire and combine to take care of you.
True.
So the easiest way to take care of yourself is take care of those who matter to you and those you matter to. And it's a learning. It took a little while for me to get that grip of it. And the fourth element, which all of us, it's blindingly obvious, is the worry that occupies our mind. I know, one of the classic problems that I have faced, and I'm not saying I've been able to get over all of it. I do love Bobby McFerrin's song, Don't Worry, Be Happy. Easier said than done, but it's a beautiful song. And what I realized was that there are a number of things that get you worried, right? It could be ill health, or it could be a foreboding feeling that something is going to go wrong. Any of that could be a source of worry. And there are enough things that can actually worry a person. So if you think, for instance, you have fallen short of targets, let us say, and you're waiting for a conversation with the boss, and it puts a degree of discomfort in your mind. Maybe you start worrying, what will he say? Now, what really happens when you worry on the road is that you keep worrying about what will happen. And if whatever you imagine would happen, then you worry twice. You might as well chill, wait for the event to happen, so you worry only once. And for all you know, the boss might understand you as to why you couldn't deliver and stand by you and tell you how to deliver. So there are things you can control and there are things you can't control. I think it's important for us to delineate the two. And if you can't change the world, and I keep saying, if there is a problem, it will have a solution. But if you can't find a solution, it's not a problem, it's a fact. You can't change facts, right? So somewhere worry is the other element. So these, I think, are a few of the ones that, so whether it is envy, whether it is fear of public opinion, your self-centricity, worry, and even guilt, for example. So these are 4 or 5 dimensions which actually pull us down, make us unhappy. What makes us happy, I think, is far easier to relate to. Most people know it. It could be family and friends, or it could be work that you do. It could be personal interest that you have where you don't have a boss, you do it just for the joy of doing it. It could be, for example, like what you do in terms of movies, and looking for insights by watching movies. So you're being entertained and also educated in the bargain. So there are personal interests that can actually make you happy. Or all of us have the curiosity to learn. So opportunities to learn could be, again, major source of happiness. And good health, that has its own values. And 2 relatively underrated sources of happiness. One is the sense of gratitude. The fact that you are where you are, what you have done, there is so many you owe to. And I always feel that we owe our successes to so many and failures to ourselves alone. And look, when you succeed, there are so many who actually stood behind you and made you what you are. And there is a tremendous sense of gratitude that you have to feel, not just for this part, but even the fact that, let's say you're healthy. Look at somebody who actually is missing out on that. And you should be grateful that you are, or if you have had good parents and that parentage. And think of an orphan who has not had a mom and dad. You realize that you should be grateful for a number of things. And sometimes the spirit of gratitude doesn't envelop our soul. We take things for granted, people for granted, situations for granted, just move on. And very often we think, I'm the reason behind my success. And that's an element which is important. And the last, which Dalai Lama himself speaks of, is the spirit of compassion. In fact, in Dalai Lama's mind, if there is a single element that he will pick, which can make us happy, it is compassion for the world around you. It is when your soul is compassionate, you tend to care for others, you do things for others, and in doing that, you become richer, happier. So that I would say are things that make us happy. I mean, it's an ocean. I'm still trying to unravel it, but this is my submission to you.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of powerful nuggets that you just mentioned for all of us to do. And I'm sure I'm going to practice the Venn diagram and trying to see that, what is that sweet spot.
It works. I'm telling you.
Absolutely. I'm going to do it. And I'm also going to share with my kids and my family after the call gets over. So thank you so much for that. And yes, gratitude underrated, but I think in today's times, that is something that we need to really be more mindful of, because as rightly put, compassion, gratitude. So let me take this conversation a little more deeper. And since we have a lot of elite HR group over here, we have been seeing, hearing, listening, employee engagement, passion index, so many words, buzzwords, whatever you call, that's been there in the organizations. So is happiness and employee engagement, are they the same genre or are they different? What's your views?
So, okay, let me pick it up from a more HR as a science point of view. If you recall, a few decades back, the term that was in vogue was employee satisfaction. And largely, it tended to focus on it because the focus was on industrial output, productivity, and how do I get more out of the people that I employ. And value extraction of people was a key. So from there, the HR fraternity started, I mean, academicians and the fraternity started looking at employee satisfaction, where you commit yourself to ensuring that they are satisfied. Now, which essentially meant it is at relatively a hygiene level, at least when it started off.
Correct.
Of course, the word is used interchangeably with a lot of other things, but I'm taking a simplistic route to be able to share my thought. So from there, we went a level higher and we said employee engagement. And today, a lot of research has been done. Employee engagement surveys have become commonplace. I mean, most organizations have used employee engagement as a very critical element. But in my years of consulting, what I realized was that, like our seminars here, there is fatigue that builds in. I mean, how many seminars do you attend? And how many days do you spare? Morning till evening, I'm on the machine when I'm working from home. So there is a fatigue that builds in. And I've seen the same fatigue actually become part of taking the survey. And engagement surveys have become more a platform for sharing resentment rather than appreciation. And I recall one common theme that emerged across multiple organizations is that employees started feeling that this whole concept of engagement is like an organization asking me, what more can you do for me? And therefore, to get you engaged, my friend, what do I need to do to engage you? So that you actually are more productive, you can give more of yourself to it, all of that. So the company seemed to be asking you in terms of what can you do for me? And that seems to be actually creating some degree of disillusionment in terms of where it is. Initially, when introduce it, there is a certain fervor. And one of the, I wouldn't say failings, but one of the shortcomings typically, and it happens even in leadership, and I'll come to that, is we actually have a survey, but not enough is done on the feedback that you get.
Absolutely.
So there is always a gap between, so you ask somebody and then you don't do enough on what needs to be done. So that also has been actually reason for this degree of disillusionment. I remember when we used to do work on leadership competencies, the starting point in some form is your competency model for that enterprise.
Right.
A lot of companies invest time and money to get a competency model done, and very little is done in terms of actual leadership development thereafter.
Yeah.
So I remember one of very senior person from a large company. He said, till yesterday, I didn't know that I was falling short of competencies required for my role and the future role. Now you have actually helped me discover. And he's saying I'm falling short in ABC. But I don't see anybody doing anything about making sure that I improve on them. And if I don't, now suddenly you actually put limelight on areas where I'm not good enough. Until yesterday, I was very confident. Now in doing what you're doing, you're actually telling me what I'm not doing, but you're not investing in it. So assessment is fine. A competency model is fine, assessment is fine, but you need to take it to its logical conclusion. And I think that's a pitfall that even engagement is going through. And I believe that happiness actually inverses it. So if I put it simplistically, an engagement model, mostly the way people see it, is what more, the organization is asking, what more can you do for me? I believe that when you're talking of happiness at work, the question that you're asking is, what more can I do for you? In very simplistic ways, I think that's the way I distinguish the two. So there is something more than satisfaction alone that engagement has looked at. I believe that happiness at work requires something more than that. So it is probably engagement is a subset of being happy at work. It's not complete in itself, and that's my submission to you.
Very true. And I think very beautifully you kind of drew the differentiation that, what can I do more for you rather than what can you do more for me? And what you rightly said about disillusionment is something that is very true. I have seen organizations where even sharing the feedback results is confidential. So it's kept absolutely confidential. So I really don't know then why they even ask for the feedback. So it's very interesting that if happiness has got so much of benefits and advantage, if you could tell us, how do we create happiness at the workplace? Is there a magic formula? Is there some kind of starting step that baby steps that we can adopt? What's your views and thoughts on that?
I mean, if I look at the HR fraternity at large, and India has been a very mature country in terms of HR practices, policies, interventions. I think the quality of education that is available, the kind of experience that diverse organizations in India provide, I think the HR community, without consciously talking of happiness, is able to build that in a number of things that they do in an enterprise.
Yeah.
Of course, you need to follow a certain directionally. So you need to start being clear in terms of values and vision of the enterprise, articulate the people philosophy, and then build your policies and practices and real-time planning and implementation on the ground. That's a sequence you follow. A lot of what is already being done is an important constituent of what happiness is. Second, like in individuals, research has repeatedly shown that every individual has an innate mean level of happiness. We're all different people, and each of us have a different kind of a level where, whether you go through bad times or great times, you get back to a certain mean state. My belief is that it is true for organizations also. Given the nature of the organization, the promoters, the employees, the kind of culture that they have, every organization has a certain mean line of its own happiness. And the quest really is to make that organization happier.
Yeah.
So it is a fallacy to believe that I will come inside in an organization, whether it is as a consultant or as a CHRO, to make happiness at work happen. I think at best what we can do through what we do is to make the place happier than what it was in terms of workplace. There is a parallel between what I was sharing earlier in terms of what makes us happy and what makes us unhappy. Now, I'll probably distill it into just 4 key elements. Now, there is belonging. So how do you create belonging? And belonging, if you notice, has a number of elements within that. And maybe if required, I can come to that later. The second aspect is learning. How do you build learning into the enterprise? Third is growth. So when I'm talking of growth, it is not just hierarchical growth. It is actually the company investing in you, providing rich roles, giving you opportunities to grow both in terms of from a career point of view, from a learning point of view, and from readiness for the future point. Any of those, they all come together in terms of the growth element. And the fourth is where, and you also referred to it when I was talking about it, is finding personal fulfillment in being inside of an organization. So when you actually have the larger purpose of an organization, when it enables you, you find fulfillment in doing what you do. And it doesn't matter whether you're lowest end of the pyramid, the lowest common denominator, or at the highest. So we always talk of values being together. So why do a company and an employee come together? A company has its own set of values which get evolved over time from the time a company is formed. An individual from the time is born, whether it is through parents, teachers, friends, over time, experiences, you develop your own set of values. When when the organization set of values and your set of values start actually finding a common ground, that's the kind of organization you wish to join. Absolutely. Because there is resonance. So personal fulfillment also could mean, so for instance, you see a lot of companies now focusing on social purpose. Now, humanity innately is good. In my mind, I mean, those who are not, more an exception. So if you have that kind of orientation, you see how many people volunteer for doing social service, apart from full-time careers that they pursue, which keeps them busy. Or for instance, when you're, say, let's look at Walt Disney. Their theme is to make others happy. So if that is what you love to do, then when you belong to the organization, you are in a shared vision state.
Yeah.
So your personal fulfillment, a number of ways can get actually enriched. So I think if I have to sum it up in terms of what you need to design at the workplace, and there could be a number of drivers and dimensions to it, it is to enable a sense of belonging, create opportunities to learn, provide growth opportunities, and ensure personal fulfillment to the extent you can. I think when you combine these in different ways, you actually create a platform.
Very true. Very, very true, and very beautifully said. And this is something which is doable. It's not something which is not doable.
I really believe that. And one of my key elements of this pursuit, and probably I learned it from the consulting world, is that there is a value in academic learning, but there is a great requirement for practical application and being able to make things happen. So you need to go from thought to finish, from strategy to execution. You need to be able to look at the academic world, blend it with the practical world to make it really yield value. On that journey, what I've tried putting together is a framework or a structure to what we might innately know, but you need to be able to put boundaries around it to design what you can as a working model. It may not be perfect, but I think directionally, as long as you're getting there, the journey is fulfilling itself.
True, true. Absolutely true. So if we have so many benefits and if we can see so much of advantages of investing in happiness at workplace and investing in humanity, as you rightly mentioned, how should HR influence the leadership or different stakeholders in investing for intangibles? Because largely what we're speaking are all falling under the category of intangibles, for example, happiness, engagement at workplace. And a connecting question to that is, besides how we should be able to influence, who according to you should be the custodian of happiness at work?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I may not have perfect answers for that, but let me think on my feet and see how to address it. Anna, I've been very fortunate to have actually moved from the roles I was doing for the first 18 years to what I've had the opportunity to do the next 18. And the primary reason is actually having opportunities to be in the world of HR. And there are two distinct elements that a CHRO works towards. One is in terms of the tangible part of it, and there is some which are intangible by itself. The way I would typically, very simplistically say it is that what is easily understood, what you see around, what you can measure easily, they're all relatively in the tangible zone.
Yeah.
And I refer to tangibles that we focus on as the science of HR.
Yeah.
And the intangibles as the art of HR. So as much as we take compensation or we talk of income, I think it is equally critical, and a lot of CHRs do a great job of it, is to build psychic incomes.
Yeah.
So let me take the simplest element of recognition. You might do a great job, but even the most accomplished person is happy when somebody compliments him for what he does. And the need for recognition is so innate to us. Now, how do you actually create that feel good that is not monetary, but still it is in the intangible space? So how to create an environment where people thank each other, respect each other, and connect with each other on a higher plane than otherwise? A lot of that is in the psychic income, or intangible zone, as I would put it. And my sense is that HR is a noble function. I mean, and I'm saying it with all modesty, largely because I've also been a practitioner, but I have embraced it because I think it gives you an opportunity to contribute to a purpose which is larger than yourself.
Yeah.
And it's a great opportunity to serve in its own right. And I also admit that it is equally thankless. So people who are in the world of HR are, I think, special people. That even though you don't get recognized enough or get thanked enough, you still pursue what you do. I think I must confess right away that the only people who seem to appreciate HR people are other HR people. So you have so many awards happening, so many seminars happening. I think across all functions in an organization, the most connected function is HR. You see the number, whether it's networks that you have, whether it is seminars that you have, whether it is awards that you give out.
Correct.
HR loves to recognize HR.
Correct.
But I'd probably they're falling short within an enterprise because the expectations are very high.
True.
And you live in a world where if things go right, the credit goes to the line manager. If things go wrong, they know who to blame. And that's a world of HR in its own right, you know. But I think what drives us still, you know, I remember a song from Eagles, one of my favorite groups. And that song has some lovely words. Oftentimes it happens that we live our lives in chains and we never ever know that we have the key. I think in the larger quest of what we do as CHROs, we perhaps discovered the key.
True.
And we no longer live in chains that bound us. And that's how you're able to actually do something greater than you as an individual. And so you're able to connect yourself to a larger purpose.
Very true.
I'm not belittling any other function, but I think this function is special in my mind.
Yeah, yeah, very true. And I think very beautifully explained the art and the science of the HR, which is tangibles and intangibles and psychic incomes. And yeah, I think it's also a thankless job in a way, but I think it's more of joy of giving than joy of receiving. I think that's a very powerful.
Absolutely, Sean. I mean, I think there is a large component of it. But then when you serve others, it might appear selfish, but actually, no, the other way around.
Selfless.
What seemingly sounds selfless, actually being selfish, because when others are happy, you become happier. So there is a virtue in what might seem like a vice of selfishness. So it's like a virtue of selfishness is true in this facet.
Very true. Very true. Absolutely true. So let me come to the last question before we open the floors to the participants to ask questions. What are three things, according to your mind, what are three things in today's time HR should do more of and should do less of to ignite employees' head, heart, and hands?
That's a tough one. It almost sounds like the Holy Grail. And I think there are more people out there as participants who will have a better answer than what I can give. So let me dumb down the question for my own comfort. And I confess, it's very difficult to distill this. But having said that, let me refer to a research done by a gentleman called Arie de Geus, the Dutch, I don't know if my pronunciation is right. He actually wrote a book called The Living Company.
Yeah,
and essentially it was around research of Fortune 500 enterprises over a large span of time. And he discovered that in a decade and a half, only 1/3 of the organization survived.
Yeah.
So he said, the life expectancy of organizations is a modest average of 12.5 years. And some manage about 40 to 50 years. So why is it that organizations are short-lived? And if there was a single answer that they have identified, it is a company's ability to believe in its people and believe in people philosophy that actually gives you longevity. Because ultimately people define the purpose, or people share the vision that you have, and therefore dreams become a reality. I think that's a great learning in its own right, and therefore the HR function in its totality of a role, you are a catalyst of change. You're there for the greater good of the enterprise and of the individuals that comprise the enterprise. So I think the first element that I have at least attempted is to articulate the people philosophy clearly. And I was alluding to it earlier. I think it's very important in an enterprise, when a CHRO is looking at an enterprise, to understand why the enterprise was formed. What are its guiding values? So like an individual, you have our own personal dreams and all of that. An enterprise is a reason why it's been created. And wealth creation is, of course, very often an end outcome of what you do, but there's a larger purpose with which somebody sets it up. So are you clear in terms of the values and vision of the enterprise? And how do you tailor a people philosophy that meets that larger vision, that meets that larger purpose? I think that's the first requirement of what HR should really look at. And very often the rest follows. The moment your philosophy is very clear in terms of people philosophy, if it is attuned to, like I said, the vision and purpose, then from there you draw your policies. And from the policies, you actually look at practices. And those practices guide you in terms of making a plan and making that philosophy fall in place. Very often what to keep and what to drop can actually be supported by this kind of way in which you look at what we need to do. So that's the first one. The second, and sometimes it is underrated, I think a key role of a CHRO, for example, is to influence the CEO to invest in people. Yeah. It is not that business leaders don't, but I think you are uniquely placed to be able to actually ensure that your function does that job in a focused manner, in a manner where it is blending the art and science of harnessing people potential, and you have a role to play. And that's why you have an HR function. But in doing all of that, if your CEO doesn't empower you, if it doesn't believe that you actually can create this magic, then I think you're disempowered. So a very important, I mean, in my mind, the second most important thing is your ability to influence the CEO to invest in people.
Yeah.
And if you're able to deliver outcomes which are measurable, that strengthens and furthers this relationship. The third is what we see in terms of the science of HR, whether it is talent management, whether it is development. I think it goes back to being able to create a world or a home for great talent. How do you manage to attract the best? In talent management, we talk about attraction, motivation, retention, all of that. But in simple terms, can you create a home for great talent? And the rest of it is a natural outcome, right? So I think that's in summary the third one that I would pick.
Amazing, lovely, and I really like this one, home for a great talent. I think it's a powerful narrative, and if this narrative is in the minds of all the leaders, and how do we create a home for a talent? I think amazing. I mean, people will try to actually create magic in the whole function. And talking about people philosophy, which is very, very important. Some of the times I've seen and experienced is a shortcut method of cut paste copy of a people philosophy. What is working perhaps good for Google or Netflix, just try and do some word crafting. I think probably that could be a starting formula for a failure. I would put that, because
benchmarks and things like that are to learn from, not to clone from.
Absolutely, very well said.
Clone, it's a poor apology to the original idea.
Absolutely.
I think you can admire, but you must learn to be able to emulate what matters to you, because each organization is unique. So it might work there, it may not work here. So you have to have the dexterity in your mind to know how to apply it into a given situation. So learnings have to be practically infused into what you do.
True.
And not just copied or imitated.
Very true. Absolutely true. Very well said. So let's take a pause here, Dr. Rajan. I think it's been 1 hour that we have been having a fire chat, one after other. So let's.
We've been asking a wonderful set of questions. Thank you, Shyam. I mean, you're very engaging, and you did promise that you wouldn't know how time flies. I didn't realize we already spent an hour.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for making it.
Thank you so much.
On that lighter note, I think we have reached 11:35 already. So I just want to, for me, something I want to just close in by saying that when I was listening to you speak, I just remembered Oliver Holmes' quote that says that, one insight is worth one life experience. And for me today, those were many insights that was worth many of my life experiences. So thank you so much for those insights. And I think it's been a good
Generous as
learning.
always, Kala. You are very, very generous.
No, because
Yes. Please go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, but really, it, the small things like, the Venn diagram, that who you are is just dependent. It's a very simple thing. It's not that we don't know, but today you brought it to our awareness by just putting the diagram, right? And today I'm just been thinking that who am I? It is just on the people who need me and people whom I need, right? And when you make a beautiful, beautiful Venn out of it, and you realize who you really are, because this is the question we all have been struggling, right? And the moment you understand this beautiful small nugget that who you are, I think happiness will always be with you, and you will always strive to make them happy. So in turn, that is the happiness. So this is one insight. I think, it's more than a life experience could have taught me. So thank you so much.